If you are going to Japan in the near future, you might be considering making a visit to Universal Studios Japan. But honestly, I think you should just skip it. Of course, this is totally your decision, but I'm here to paint a picture for you of what I experienced when I went to Universal Studios Japan, and hopefully that will help you make the best decision for your vacation. I went to Japan back in October, and I decided, being a huge theme park enthusiast, that I needed to visit Universal Studios Japan, especially Super Nintendo World. My husband is a big Super Nintendo fan, and I thought that he would enjoy that, so we decided we were gonna go. Now, we definitely made a few mistakes along the way, but even now, knowing those mistakes, I still wouldn't do it again. The first mistake we made was not staying in Osaka. Universal Studios Japan is in Osaka, and we were staying in Kyoto, so we had to take a train that was about an hour to get back and forth from Universal Studios Japan, and that hour really, that's a lot of really valuable time that you're gonna want to use to get to the park earlier. We didn't have that luxury because we decided we just were not gonna wake up at the crack of dawn, because we were there in October and we were hoping to stay for Halloween Horror Nights, which happens in the evenings. So we were thinking we really want to sleep in a little bit so that we can make sure we can stay up the whole day and spend the whole day in the park so that we can get to Halloween Horror Nights at the end. That was just a mistake all around. I think that if you are dead set on going to Universal Studios Japan, you should probably spend 2 nights in Osaka just for that. You're gonna want to be there the first night so that when you wake up, you're already closer to the park than we were. And then you're probably gonna wanna stay there that same night that you spend the whole day in the park so that you don't have to change hotels afterwards. You might actually wanna stay in Osaka a little longer because it's a wonderful place to visit. There's a lot to see and do. And we actually ended up leaving Universal Studios and just going sightseeing. And once we did that, we said, gee, we really should have just spent the day in Osaka instead of at Universal Studios Japan. The second mistake we made was not getting to Universal Studios Japan at opening, or honestly, before opening. We got there at around 10 a.m. and that was just not really enough. The park usually opens somewhere between 8:30 and 9 a.m. And you need to be there at opening if you want to get into Super Nintendo World to get a virtual queue. So when you get into the park, you will then be allowed to enter the virtual queue, not before. So you can only get into the virtual queue once you are physically in the park. My husband and I got in at around 10 a.m. and we actually did still manage to get in the queue for Super Nintendo World, but our time slot wasn't until 8 p.m. So now it was 10 a.m. and we weren't getting into Super Nintendo World until 8 p.m. So we had to kill a lot of time before being able to enter this world. Now, we had already planned on staying into the evening because we wanted to experience Halloween Horror Nights. But what we didn't plan on was just not really having enough to do in the park. I've said this before in my Tokyo Disney planning guide video, but the Japanese are not shy about lining up for stuff. And that includes restaurants, that includes for merch, that includes for rides, anything. They will line up for it. And so the rides at Universal get really, really, really long. We waited almost 2 hours to ride Jaws, which isn't even a very popular ride. So you're gonna be waiting around 2 hours for pretty much everything. Some of the scary rides that they did overlays for Halloween Horror Nights, they were active throughout the day as well, and we did actually line up for one of them. But the queues are just brutal. They're outside in the sun, and they're just so long, and there isn't a lot to look at. There isn't shade. Bring an umbrella if you are looking for shade. That was a mistake that we made. We didn't bring an umbrella. But we were gonna have to spend all of our time waiting in lines, which is fine. But the problem is that there was nothing else to do. You could only just wait in lines. And, you know, if we're there from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m., just standing in lines, that makes for a very, very difficult day. Even the lines for food were quite long, and you couldn't go into one of the quick service locations and just sort of camp out at a table for a while because there are lineups and there are other people that want to use those tables to eat their meals. So there really wasn't anywhere to sit and hang out. The shops were all pretty crammed with people, and the shops all sort of had the same merch no matter which shop you went into. So after a while, you're seeing the same merch over and over, and there isn't anywhere to sit in these shops. A lot of people were just sitting outside on the ground, which again, I don't mind sitting on the ground, but not for the whole day. And so it just sort of becomes less and less fun as the day goes on and you're waiting for this 8 o'clock time slot to get into the land that you want to see. And then of course, once you actually get into the land that you want to see, there isn't that much to do in there. And if you want to do everything, you're going to be waiting in really long lines, both for the food and the rides, and also for the merch. A lot of the Super Nintendo merch you'll find all over the park, not just in Super Nintendo World, but there are some things in there that people are going to want to snatch up, and if you're going to get there at 8 p.m., you might not see as much stock of some of the items that you want to buy. Now, maybe it was just the time of year that we went, but it was just really, really, really packed with people. And I think that there isn't enough going on, not enough attractions, not enough restaurants, not enough shows to eat up all of those crowds. So no matter where you went, no matter what you did, you were like a sardine, packed wall to wall with tons of people. And that just made it really difficult throughout the whole day to enjoy ourselves, because we always felt like, oh my goodness, we're in this stampede. Now keep in mind, I'm someone who spends a lot of time at Disney parks, and I love Universal Studios in Orlando. I've spent a lot of time there as well. And the reason that I think those parks work better than Universal Studios Japan is because there is more of that peripheral stuff to do, more little things going on, more small rides, more little shows, more little corners to sort of sit and rest or relax. I really didn't see much, if any, of that at Universal Studios Japan. It felt to me like they built the park in a really big rush, and they built a lot of big ticket items, but they didn't fill it up with enough other stuff to satisfy the demand, the crowds that are basically pouring in constantly. So basically what ended up happening with my husband and I was we got there at 10 and we spent 2 hours waiting in line for Jaws, and then we spent about an hour trying to get food at one of the quick service locations. Sidebar, the food was small portion for a very high price. It was not the best. It was fun. I really like Jurassic Park, so I enjoyed hanging out in that area. But again, there really wasn't anything else to do unless you were willing to stand in line for 2 hours to ride the coaster there. So we had to leave and then walk around and decide, okay, well, we have to get in line for something else now. There really isn't any other thing to do. So we got in line for another ride, and after about 30 minutes of waiting in that line, we realized, I don't think we're going to be able to spend the next, almost 10 hours doing this with nowhere to sit, difficult to find places to eat, nowhere to really chill out for a little bit, and then spend the entire evening here after that. So we made the call to leave the park, and unfortunately, you can't come back in. Once you leave, you're done. So it's not like we could leave, go hang out in Osaka, and then come back for the evening. No, it was, if you're gone, you're gone. So we made the call, we decided to leave, and we ended up going to visit some sites in Osaka, and we had a wonderful day doing that. Now, it might have been a completely different experience if we had gotten there at 8 a.m. and prioritized Super Nintendo World, done that, and then left. But in our minds, we were gonna hang around until the end of the day, again, for Halloween Horror Nights. So I think a big mistake that we made was trying to do both of those things. We wanted to get there early enough to still get a virtual queue for Super Nintendo World, and also not too early that we were gonna just be so tired before Halloween Horror Nights. So if we had just picked one of those things, it might have worked out differently, but because we were trying to do both, it was just not gonna work. We did also spend some time in the Harry Potter area, and it is very similar to what you will find at Universal Studios Orlando. So honestly, I would skip that too if you are someone who has access to Universal Studios Orlando, if that's somewhere you want to go. It was just so brutally crowded in Universal Studios Japan in the Harry Potter area. We tried to go into a shop and it was terrible. We thought about buying a wand and going around and trying to do some interactive stuff, but the lines to buy wands, even just in the carts, because you can go into the shops to buy a wand, or you can go to Ollivander's, obviously, or you can just go to one of those carts. I couldn't even get in to see the wands, the display of wands, and try to choose one because it was just so slammed with people. I couldn't get a butterbeer. Like, I'm not someone who wants to elbow my way in, and you really have to be willing to do that to get to a lot of these things. Wait in a really long line and be sort of like jostled. And I was just like, nope, I can't. I'm out of here. So we went and saw the castle, took some pictures, but it was just not really an enjoyable experience. Of course, this was just our experience when we went. You might have a very different experience if you decide to go, but even knowing everything that I know now, I still would not go back to Universal Studios Japan. It's just not different enough from the ones in the States, whereas the Disney parks in Japan are quite different from the ones in the States, and the Disney parks are just much better than Universal Studios Japan. So that's just my opinion. I hope this was helpful for you. Please leave me any questions if you have them, and I'll see you next time. Bye.